Wasting no time, Nick got out of the car the moment we parked. I lagged behind a little due to his heels giving him a little boost in speed. I expected the warehouse to be locked and for us to have to use Nick's lock-picking skills, but that didn't turn out to be the case. The door was slightly open, showing us how the dark building looked inside. It was as if Piper wanted us to just walk right in. Silently, we slipped in through the small opening and dove right into danger, unaware of what would greet us. The place appeared to be huge and cluttered with machines along with some shelving. More bags of the red powder were piled on tables near the door. I prayed that only 3 children suffered to make all this and not more that hadn't been found yet. A clicking noise put my nerves on edge. I drew my gun, reminding myself what lurked in the dark needed our help. Between the shelves came a sound of something falling to the floor. I looked over just in time to spot a very tall and thin woman charging at us, her long hair a mess and face sunken. Firing 2 shots knocked her out. She cried out, collapsing to the ground. She wasn't dead, but that didn't make me feel any better. Shooting a human target made my stomach tighten almost to the point where I couldn't move. More faces appeared from the darkness. Some male, some female. Their bodies tall and hunched over, long fingers twitching to dig into our flesh. At least it looked like they didn't have a good handle of how to use magic yet. One tossed out a cracking bolt of light, missing us by a mile to hit the pile of bags behind us, the powder pouring down to the floor. It drove them all into a frenzy, trying to get at the red powder first, no longer caring about the intruders. We ducked out of the way from the swarm coming from every crevice. Some didn't notice the drug due to the crowd and wanted to kill us. I fired, hitting most of my targets, my stomach flipping from stress and my eyes starting to sting with tears of fear. I wasn't really meant for this type of thing. The ones I didn't hit skittered back off into the dark, weary of the gun. A witch got close, hands raised ready to attack. As she screeched towards us, Nick raised his gun to shoot. An odd expression came over his face. His hand slightly shook and he didn't pull the trigger. I grabbed him, dragging my partner aside as the witch cut my back with her claws. In a frenzy, she attacked and tore at my clothing. Blood flew from the cuts, staining the ground as I shielded him. Through the pain, I could tell the cuts weren't life-threatening. With some difficulty, I got my gun pressed against her side to stun the feral witch. She fell, pinning me down for a minute. I struggled to get her off, concerned over more attacks and mostly for Nick. He'd never just froze like that before. The other witches stayed behind, a little bit scared of us for now. I quickly got down to Nick's level. He'd fallen on his knees, and his hand covered his mouth, his eyes wide, seeing something I couldn't. I shot her, his voice so low I almost didn't hear him. "Mickey," I started, not sure of what I should be asking. To my horror, a crack started to appear under his hand beside his mouth. I took his shoulders slightly, trying to get him to talk about what upset him. Dropping his hand, I could see the new injury. Some hairline cracks started along the corner of his mouth. I shot my partner, he finally whispered. Aiming a gun at the witch triggered a memory for him, one I never wanted to come back. Abarash said everything about his partner was scrubbed from all records. Even if he heard her name, he risked himself cracking. What happened back then was such a traumatizing event. His mind scrambled his memories for protection. This a really bad time for something like that to resurface. More witches started to close in. They sensed weakness, my back bleeding from the cuts that stung like crazy, and Nicky looked to be in no condition to fight, his hand loosely on the grip of the gun. He wanted to force himself to keep going. From the looks at the spider web cracks on his face, he would shatter if he pushed himself. "I'll carry this for you." Reaching down, I took his gun. His fingers curled into a fist, ashamed of himself. He'd done enough of the work. I could handle the rest so he could take a break. Standing up, I turned to face the small army of witches that surrounded us, each at different states of being turned. A few almost looked human, some starting to get a grasp of how their magic worked, their fingertips crackling with electric blue energy ready to be thrown. Off in the distance, I noticed someone watching us from a catwalk across the back of the building. In the dim light, I couldn't see their face, but knew who it was. The leader of the entire operation came out to look down on us. That man killed at least 3 children. He ruined so many lives and turned these humans into something that could never be cured. Turns out, you didn't need a special strategy when it came to fighting newly turned witches. You just needed to be extremely pissed off. My goal simply to reach Piper and to protect Nick. Nothing would get in my way of those 2 things. I fired the stunning bullets into the crowd, my entire body hot from rage and fear. Some of the electric attacks shot in our direction. It caught my arm, I raised to block it. It hurt like hell, but it didn't take me out. These creatures not at all as strong as the ones we faced before. The numbers would be the main problem. There were far too many to shoot. Some broke free, getting within arm's reach. Letting out a yell of frustration, I punched the nearest one, my knuckles feeling like they would break. At least that took one witch down. I did regret hurting them after everything they'd been through. That thought quickly got pushed to the back of my mind. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw one charging towards us far too late. At the last second, Nick swooped in to land a punch of his own, his hand smoking for some reason as the witch dropped, face also smoking a little. He'd taken bullets from one of the magazines and somehow knew a way to activate them in his hand. The stunning magic hurt him, but mostly landed on the witch. Grabbing another bullet, he tightened his fist to punch another witch. We caught each other's eyes. Without any words needed, I knew he could cover me as I went after Piper. Breaking through the crowd, I ran faster and harder than I ever did in my life. Weaving between machines and junk in the warehouse, I charged forwards. Any witch trying to get in the way got a swift bullet. The chest an easy target while running. I felt scared as I ran. I soon got low on bullets. Piper, a half-breed with powers I didn't know about. I doubted I could really win against him. We just needed to hold out for backup to show up. I almost reached him. A massive witch stood in my way between the leader who started to walk down the stairs to meet the intruders. The witch twice my size. It must have taken a lot of the drug to become something like this. Long limbs, thin and threatening. It looked so unnatural, and reasonable shouldn't be able to stand on those spindly legs. Beady eyes stared down at a smaller target. A large mouth grinned when I was forced to stop. My gun clicked empty, tossing his aside. I checked to see how many more bullets was left in the gun I took from Nick. There might be enough for the witch, but not for Piper. A nice assassin and a knock. The witch spoke as if it was struggling to find words. A hand slowly reached out, ready to pluck my body off the ground. Gritting my teeth, I made eye contact with the thing. There wasn't any damn time to waste on dealing with it. I felt pissed, so angry my hands could barely keep from shaking. Back the fuck up. I growled at the witch in a voice so filled with venom I didn't even know where it came from. The witch hesitated. Standing my ground, I didn't take my eyes off it. This situation something it didn't know how to deal with. Prey should be scared, trying to run away. If I started to stand up to it, I may either be crazy or have more power than it. By some miracle, the witch decided that I could back up my threatening demeanor. It stood aside, slinking back off into the darkness, leaving me to face the leader alone. Overall, he looked just like a normal person. His hair a common brown, and eyes creased with crow's feet. With his hands behind his back, he didn't flinch when I fired some stunning bullets his way. I saw them tear his clothing, but he still didn't move, the bullets having no effect on him. With a nasty smile, he enjoyed my struggle. Shoot all you want. My mother was practically immune to magic and the last of her kind. There is nothing an agent like yourself can do to stop me. And what a disgrace. All this effort to save humans. Where was this kind of action when a beast was tearing through our community, eating all the children in sight? Good thing he was the type to do a villain monologue. Now I knew my gun would be useless and I could think of another plan. But his comments pissed me off to even think clearly. Just because a shitty thing happened to you, it doesn't give you a reason to hurt others. Anyone who killed children for their selfish reasons doesn't deserve to plan the victim card. I snapped back, wanting to punch his face in. The corporation is the reason for all of this. Those children's blood is on your hands, and there is nothing a hypocrite magic-using agent can do about it. Do you have any idea how many agents are using Coven? In fact, you look familiar. Have you brought from us? Have a sister by chance? I became taken aback by his words. I froze, hard a block of ice. It gave him enough time to start cackling, with his face starting to change, his body transforming, showing off his other side. Piper's hair becoming white and ears getting longer. Spotting a steel pipe nearby, I grabbed it and in one swift movement, swung it directly into his face. The cracking sound jarred my bones as blood spurted from his mouth. His body fell hard to the ground, the transformation stopping. The dumbass was so confident all his bases were covered. He never considered there would be someone working for the corporation who didn't use magic at all. I turned ready to go back to help Nick when the doors of the warehouse burst open. 2 more agents came in, moving faster than I could see. In a few minutes, the other agents cleaned up the rest of the witches. Form he looks of things, they went through a tough fight, taking down the other dealers. Piper needed to be dragged out, jaw broken from the steel pipe to the face. I was questioned on how he got knocked out, and the agents looked stunned when I said I didn't use magic, just a lucky shot. I found Nick and let him sit off to the side. Soon the scene became swarming with the cleanup crew, people getting the witches onto stretchers to be treated. The corporation already set up a housing community for them. They would always be a creature now, but at least they would be taken care of. I helped carry stretchers of witches out to be brought to a safe place, my body still hyped up from the fight. I refused to get treatment for my back until all the witches were looked after first. Piper's words rang through my head. Helping out was selfish on my part. I was just trying to see if any of the creatures appeared familiar. The sun starting to rise by the time I sat down with Nick. I borrowed white shirt to replace my torn, bloody one. Someone had placed a band-aid over the cracks still on his face. "Are you all right?" I asked my partner as we watched the cleanup crew tidy up. "I should be asking you that," he answered. I was about to say I felt fine. The stress about my sister came crashing down. Unable to help it, I told him what Piper said before I knocked his teeth out. Nick appeared startled. He stood up at once, ready to borrow a car to make it over to my sister's apartment to check on her. I was so thankful to have a partner like him that would drop everything for a simple worry. It's been years since I lived in that city. Nothing really changed, making finding the apartment building easy. It's still early in the morning and my sister could be mad for getting woken up. She needed to forgive me for checking in on her. Nick stood near as I rang the intercom at the front door. The lobby locked, so she would need to let us in. Every second that passed was agony. My nerves fried as I rang the bell again and again with no answer. I pulled out my phone to call her with no result. Nick, the only thing to keep me grounded. He suggested we should contact the landlord to see if he was able to do a welfare check. It was worth a shot. We got lucky, and not only did the landlord pick up, he was a morning person and very friendly. He listened to why I called and heard the stress in my voice as I asked if it was possible for him to have someone to knock on my sister's door. He hesitated, his kind tone as stressed as my own. As I listened, I slumped against the cool tile wall as my world collapsed around me. I'm sorry you need to hear this from me. You seem like a caring brother. Layla moved out a month ago. There was an incident with the police. From what I heard, she was arrested for a minor drug case. Out within a few days, and that was the last I've heard about her. She didn't leave any contact numbers behind. My mouth almost too dry to speak. This couldn't be happening. I talked to her a few days ago. She sounded fine. No mention of any of this. The kids, I started. Oh, they're fine. Staying with a boyfriend, so I've heard. He was trying to get her doing better. They had fights over it that the neighbors complained about, so that's how I know all of this. For a while, things quieted down. Then the arrest happened. I don't have his number. I really wish I did. His first name is Brian, if that helps. That name brought back so many memories I tried to keep locked up. He was the boyfriend she had when we moved in. Most likely the father of Jerry, my nephew. Brian, the one with a drug problem. His small, cramped apartment a mess, him not helping out in the slightest. I didn't want to believe she'd gotten back together with him after all this time. A flood of noise came to my head, so much that I needed to press a hand over one ear trying to block it out. If it's the same guy, I know his number. Thank you for telling me all this. Did she leave anything behind? I asked, trying to speak over the sounds rattling around in my head. She didn't have much to start with. All of the kids' things went with them. She took her clothing and such. Her couch and mattress she left behind is long gone. Sorry. They were too worn out to save. She owed some rent, but I'll take that as a loss. From what the neighbors heard, her money was coming from a family member. I think that was you, and I don't want you to keep paying for her. My chest hurt, so much I thought it might break open. I'd been sending her money since I moved out. I wanted her to take care of herself and the kids. How did it all end up like this? I was completely blind to everything going on. If I just once came by to see her in these years, would anything have changed? I got the landlord's name and promised him I would pay back what she owed. Right now, I needed to find her. Nick listened, worry clear on his face. I asked him if there was a way to abuse his corporation connections to find her address. The brain I knew might not be the same person. If he was, he might not know where she was either. He quickly got on the phone to call in any favors he may have to try and find her. With shaking hands and a roaring of noise in my head, I dialed a number I still remembered from so many years ago. The call answered within a few rings as if he was waiting. I told him who it was, and it took him a little bit to clue in. Skylar, God, you sound so different. Jesus, I've been trying to find your number. I'm so glad I kept this one. You changed your last name and everything. I didn't have the money to hire someone to find you, and your sister refused to give me your number. I swear, she had a hidden phone just for your calls. He trailed off, unsure of what else to say. There was a hard question to ask hovering in the air, so he let it out. How much have you found out? You would never call me otherwise. A mixture of a baby crying and the sounds of Layla and him fighting came into my head. I couldn't speak for a while. It all hurt too damn much to hear his voice again after getting as far away from him as I could. When I didn't answer, he kept speaking. Listen, I understand if you don't believe me or hate me still after everything. I was a piece of shit to you and your sister and God, the kids. I have no reason for why I was like that. I'll say I'm sorry a million times if it would make it better, but it won't. All of this hit me after I nearly died from an overdose. I was in the hospital and it sunk and I had a kid somewhere. That got me on my feet. I stopped using and found your sister again. We've been on and off for 2 years after I got my shit together. A sound came from the other end. He started talking with Jessie, my niece. She'd just woken up wondering who was on the phone. I pressed the phone against my ear so hard it hurt just to hear her voice. We both knew we needed to get everything out in the open and not tell her who called just yet. Brian went into a different room so we could keep talking. Are the kids all right? I asked, finally finding my voice. Yeah, as much as they can be. They miss you and their mom, but I needed to take them out of that place. I hate to say it, but I don't think she should be near them for a while. Layla needs to see someone. I don't know what she got a hold of. It was only a little, but it changed her so much. She saw how much she was scaring the kids and went off of it for about a month. Then she just snapped in. Jesus, she bit Jessie. Nearly took a chunk out of her arm. I can totally understand if you think I'm lying. She's your sister and I was such a piece of shit towards you. My body curled up tight. The images of those witches flashed through my mind and I almost crushed the phone in my hand. My breathing started to get heavy and it took everything to not pass out. I'll find her. I'll take care of her, I said in a trembling voice. Skylar, I'm sorry. I wanted to help her out this time. You've been taking care of her for years. Back when you lived with us, you paid our bills and went to school and took care of the kids. I've always been sorry for that. All the adults in your life let you down and I was one of them. Shaking my head, I forced back the tears remembering that point of my life. We both worked like hell, didn't we? Layla always out of the house, almost never home, wasn't she? There was simply no way she wasn't working and dumping everything on her younger brother. This needed to be a lie. All of it. For some reason, Brian was being overly cruel. What he said next made everything click. It all made sense to the point I couldn't deny it. I think she only took you in to use you. After all these years, I finally saw what kind of person my sister was. I could only see her as the person I grew up with. A little bit spoiled but caring. The only person on my side. Then again, it was simple to compliment my short hair if that meant I gave her my allowance, or covered for her when she snuck out to see her boyfriend. It was possible my sister was using me for so long. I just assumed it to be love. Getting down to my level, Nick whispered that he had her address. Everything I learned didn't change the fact she was still my sister. If she took some coven, she needed treatment. Those sounds still echoing through my head. I almost couldn't bring myself to stand back up. I think she's in trouble. I just got her address. I'm going to go see her. Thank you for taking care of the kids. I'll come and see them when I can. I was about to hang up when Brain spoke again. Hey, Skylar, I'm proud of you. I got an ugly hiccup of a cry out from my chest. We couldn't dwell on it. I thanked him again to follow Nick to the car and towards my sister. Wherever she ended up, I was going to find her. The car wasn't even parked when I bolted out from it. The place looked like a very run-down house with an overgrown lawn. The last place I wanted Layla to be in. Nick was right behind as I pounded on the front door. Paint flaking down from the force. Movement from behind the door made my heart leap into my throat. It opened slowly to show the musty, ruined inside. The person standing in front of my eyes looked like someone I almost didn't recognize. Her red hair cut short and limp, sunken eyes and a lot of weight lost. She'd always been curvy, unable to drop the pounds no matter what kind of diet she'd gone on in the past. Her limbs now too similar to a witch's for comfort. Unless you have something really good, I don't do two at once, she said in a weak voice. With shrug, Layla turned to walk back inside as I froze to the spot. She collapsed back onto a dirty, torn couch, asleep in seconds. I walked inside to see just how bad the place looked. The carpet crusted over from all the food and drink litter around. The walls covered with years of cigarette smoke with water stains mixed in. The house should be torn down. No human should live here. And yet, my sister was asleep on the couch. In that small front room, so much sound came crashing down into my head at once. A voice screaming over top of it all. That I'd done all of this. I abandoned her. She was going to turn into a witch that hurt others. Not just others, but her own children. Once the corporation knew about it, she would end up being hunted and killed. It was all my fault. I was to blame. I'd killed my sister. Nick grabbed a hold of my arms to pull my trembling body into a tight hug. I realized that the voice wasn't in my head. I said all of that out loud without knowing. The only thing keeping me from snapping completely was my partner trying to squeeze the stress out of my body. I've never felt so small before. There is no way you could have known. She made her own choices and never reached out for help. He started and I shook my head against his chest. I'm her brother. It's my job to. It's your job to love her. You've done that. You did everything you could. But the bitter truth of it all. I got so busy trying to work and support us, I missed everything about her. I never once came in person to check up on her and just sent money her way assuming that would be enough. Still convinced I failed, I pulled away to go over to my sister. She needed to be woken up and taken somewhere she could be taken care of. Nick stood back to watch us. I shook her shoulder, saying her name. She swatted my hand away trying to sleep. Layla, it's your brother. You need to go somewhere with me, I said softly. I don't have a brother, she muttered, still with her face nearly pressed into the dirty couch. It's Audrey. The name tasted bitter, something I sworn I would never call myself again. As much as I hated it, I loved her a little bit more. She looked up, eyes glazed over, confused. She still didn't know who I was, but knew the name. Audrey is in the other room, she mumbled and put her head back down. I didn't understand why she would say that. Was there another person in the house? Someone she might confuse for a sister? Suddenly, Nick moved. He swiftly went across the room on a mission to the hallway. Skylar, call an ambulance and do not follow me, he said sternly as he disappeared in the dark doorway. Layla looked just to be tired. She didn't need an ambulance as far as I could tell. Whatever got my partner going would be a bad sight. I felt it down to my bone. I should have listened to him, my body moving on its own as I followed behind, not doing anything he ordered. I found him in a side room, nothing inside it besides trash, a mattress on the floor and a small plastic table. He was on his knees picking something up from the stained mattress, his suit jacket off to wrap up whatever he found. When he stood up and I saw what he held, my knees gave out. He'd wrapped up a newborn in his jacket. Thin red hair made it clear who she belonged to. The child far too small and far too still. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think. Any fear I felt facing a supernatural creature was nothing compared to the feeling that burst into my chest. He acted quickly, knocking off the beer bottles from the table to clean it off. With on hand, he drew a circle and wrote some odd words along it. Within seconds, he also had drawn more circles in a spell so complex I've never seen one like it before. Carefully, he placed the bundle on top of the writing, his next action causing me to stifle a scream. Without hint of pain, Nick snapped off his pinky finger, a digit turning into a glittering rough ruby after he removed it. The small stone placed on the bundle of fabric and the circles glowed. When they faded, the stone did as well. The half second that passed felt like the longest in my life. The small face poking out from his jacket scrunched up and she gave out a very loud cry. Soon she wailed as Nick picked her back up, oddly being very good at carrying and smoothing a crying baby. The next few hours became a haze. He called an ambulance for my sick niece. He could only heal her so much and she needed to be looked over by some doctors. Her weight nothing healthy for a baby her age. At first, the police arrived for my sister. Agents replaced them to take her away. Forms handed over for me to sign. They explained that the withdrawals would last her entire life. Unless she was supervised, she risked harming any child she may come across. I would be able to see her and call her whenever I liked. But Layla's life now said to be taken care of her for her. Housing and food provided. Some freedoms but not much. The forms just to say I understood and not asking my permission. No matter what I said, the corporation would take her. I didn't want to believe that Layla had a daughter without anyone knowing about it. I spoke to Brain, who was shocked. He said it would explain a lot if she'd been pregnant recently. She'd always looked fairly normal while she was pregnant with the other two. She didn't really gain any weight and we didn't know about my nephew until he was born. It's possible Brian wouldn't have noticed a third child if she kept it from him. Audrey looked to be doing well but needed to stay in the hospital until she gained the weight back. After she was taken care of, I did something I never wanted to. I called my parents to sort of fill them in on everything. I thought they might want to know about another grandchild. They didn't. At least they heard me through. The only words my father replied with was, "It sounds as if you have this all under control." He hung up after that, both of them washing their hands of their children and grandchildren. I stayed in the city, not returning home yet. Nick hung around making sure I ate something as I spent a few days just silently mulling over everything that happened in a hotel room. When my niece recovered, she would need to go somewhere. Brian didn't know who her father might be. He hadn't been on good terms with my sister for a long time. He only been by for the kids. He offered to take her, but I could sense the stress in his voice. He already trying to raise two kids along with dealing with his own recovery. A newborn would break him even though he would never admit it. Unaware of how long passed, I ran the options through my head 1,000 times, my thoughts becoming decluttered and so loud I needed to get out of the building. I walked aimlessly, everything just so loud it was impossible to deal with. Finding an empty park, I sat on a swing for who knows how long. The clutter in my head nearly getting to a breaking point. The sun set as I sat, one hand pressed over my ear trying to drown out the sounds. A closed umbrella came into my sight and a voice cut through all the noise. It's the only thing I could hear clearly. It might rain. Nick stood holding out the umbrella for me to take. I almost cried seeing him, his hand scarred over from missing a finger. He sacrificed it to save my niece and would never get that finger back. Guilt mixed into all the other emotions as I took the small umbrella in my hand, twisting it in stress. I needed to tell him the worst news and didn't know how to start. He walked over to the swing next to mine. To my surprise, he put one foot awkwardly on it, then another so he was standing on the swing. "I've never done this before," he commented looking at the park from his new height. "You're still wearing the heels," I pointed out. He still wore the chunky heeled shoes. Nothing too feminine but enough for someone to notice. I like being tall. A hint of a laugh bubbled up. Nikki, the only person who could cheer me up when I felt this bad. The noise dying down after he arrived, my chest still feeling like a black hole from what I needed to tell him. "I can't keep doing cases with you. Audrey doesn't have anyone. My parents won't take her in. My sister won't ever be able to be trusted around her and Brian can't take care of another kid. We can still see each other but..." It felt too hard to finish. My eyes already flooded with tears I rubbed away. To start with, I wanted to do cases for the money. Who cared about my life? As long as I could get my only family taken care of. Now, with my sister out of the picture, I wanted to use what I've saved so far for a house for Brian and the kids. He just didn't know it yet. Along with some collage funds. I wanted those too. Now 3 to never have to worry about money. With Audrey needing someone to raise her, I simply couldn't do dangerous jobs every other week. I needed to stay around for her. I expected Nick to be upset. Instead, it kept staring forwards as if trying to process what I said. There is another option, he offered. My face flushed, and the anger came no matter how much I wanted to keep it down. She's my family. I can't abandon her. It's because I didn't check up on my sister this all happened. I just keep playing around. I stopped myself, regretting the words I already said and what I nearly just did. We weren't playing around doing cases. What we'd done so far helped a great deal of people. Luna alive and happy because I worked that case. I just felt so useless in my mind. My actions didn't matter. That no matter what, these cases would have been finished and I did nothing to help. Nick was right about the option to give up my niece. It cut down deep to even think about. Either way, I would be abandoning my family. Recently, there has been an increase of supernatural creatures of different species getting together. Nick started on an entire new conversation that confused the hell out of me. Ignoring my puzzled look, he went on. The issue is most species cannot produce an offspring together, and the birth rates among creatures is normally low. On top of that, most species cannot raise another from their conditions being so different from their own. A new trend is creatures adopting human children because they are fairly simply to take care of. You want me to let a creature adopt my niece? I said, slowly stunned. I would like you to do what you feel is best. I am only bringing this up because word of your situation has leaked. I've been hounded by a great deal of couples to just mention the option. On top of being a flood of written requests in the office, even though there has been no word of what you've decided to do. It is only a matter of time before one of those creatures speak to you directly, and I would have liked the idea to come from your partner and not from a couple pressuring you. I would have had no idea there was such a demand for children. It'd only been a few days, and already a few families lined up praying to even be considered. Chewing on my lip, I thought over what Nick said. I've been around enough supernatural creatures to know about the good ones. Not all of them ate humans. Some were more caring than any human I'd met. If I went down that route, my niece would be cared for. Maybe even more than what I could give her. The mixture of stress, no sleep, and lack of anything in my stomach besides some vending machine snacks made it turn. My face must have shown it. Nick reached into his pocket to pull out a wrapped candy. He handed it down and I didn't really feel like eating it. I've noticed you get an upset stomach often. I made these to help with that, he explained. I unwrapped it to see a round golden hard candy. It tasted like honey and did help with my stomach. Yet again I wanted to cry. Not only did he notice something so minor, he put the time into fixing it. I didn't know what to do. Letting someone take Audrey would be the better idea. I couldn't provide the care two parents could. I loved her and would do my damn best to make her happy, but lacked any confidence myself. I was just getting to like myself. What kind of life would she have with a parent like that? At the same time, giving her up felt selfish on my part. It was as if I didn't want to deal with her cramping my lifestyle and shipped her off. Nick tried to step down from the swing. When one foot moved, the entire swing did. He found it difficult to stay balanced. This man jumped from a cliff before and now he couldn't bring his foot down half a step to the ground. Sighing, I stood up to help him down. Every time I needed to support his weight, I forgot how heavy Nick was. His foot slipped and we crashed down to the ground. I nearly choked on the hard candy, making him decided the next batch would be soft ones. We both stayed on the ground where we fell, looking up at the dark sky as a misty drizzle started to come down. None of this is your fault, he said over the gentle sounds of the rain. I know, but I won't ever be able to forgive myself. This guilt is going to be here no matter what I do. How do you handle it? Looking over, I stared at him, trying to read his expression. He'd killed his partner. Nicky carried that guilt every day. I didn't know what I could do to help him with that besides keep telling him it wasn't his fault. Now I understood. That didn't really amount to much. The band-aid still on the side of his mouth, showing the cracks hadn't fully healed yet. I keep living. The background noise in my head faded to be replaced by the sound of the rain. We may be stuck with what happened in the past. If we kept moving on, then maybe someday things might hurt less. The wounds possibly never fully healing over, but we never would have a chance to forgive ourselves if we just stopped. Nicky really was stronger than anyone gave him credit for. With the rain getting heavy, Nick forced us to go back to the hotel. A decent meal, a hot shower, and a long nap later, my head got clear enough to finally make the hardest choice of my life. Audrey recovered, ready to be taken home. Her cheeks pudgy as they should be. She very vocal, like how my sister acted growing up. I sat holding her swaddled in my arms, talking to her in an empty hospital hallway. I wanted to tell her so much in such a short amount of time. She wiggled and answered to my questions in words only she understood. I loved her more than I had any right, but I didn't regret my choice. A pair arrived, followed by Anker, who needed to look over the process for some reason. One tall and thin with pale green hair. Their face was flat, with large sparkling eyes. The one next to them was a middle-aged man, his black hair tied back and a horn coming from his head. Hooves clicked against the titles as they stopped to wait it, appearing as nervous as I felt. I wasn't ready, but I stood up to go over to them. They didn't reach out. not believing this was really happening. Are you sure? The taller one asked in a shaking voice. I'm positive, I said and held out Audrey for them. It was nearly impossible to pick out a couple from the hundreds who submitted the forms. I knew no matter who I picked, my niece would have a good life. Still, I felt bad for everyone I needed to pass on. At some point I would tell Brian about supernatural creatures so him and the kids could see Audrey and her adopted family. He regretted not being able to take her just as much as I did. We both knew this was the right choice though. The moment the bundle was in Fleur's arms, the taller one, they broke down into tears. They muttered a word I didn't know the meaning of over and over again while brushing Audrey's hair with a long finger. Their partner translated the word. It meant treasure. This was absolutely the best choice. My only worry was how spoiled my niece might be the next time I saw her. We stayed and spoke with each other for a while until they needed to go. The pair left with a lot of tears and hugs, ready to finally live as a family. Answer stayed behind holding some more forms I needed to sign. I swear, I've already signed 1,000 of them. As I filled them out, I wondered why he led us to do this case. It was possible he knew the outcome, at least part of it. He could have easily found my sister's drug arrest if he looked up her name. I did put her down as my emergency contact, so I assumed someone looked her up. And then a case comes by about a drug ring in the same city she lived in. He approved us doing this case aware there might be a chance my sister was involved in some way. I handed over the forms and paused to look at him, his regular scowl staring back down. Did you know about my sister? I asked him, risking it. He snatched the sheets away, giving my finger a paper cut. I do not care enough about a human enough. Thank you. I cut in, knowing he wouldn't admit it either way. I felt glad we took this case. I could finally be there for my sister instead of some other agent finding her far too late. Anker didn't expect those words, his face flushing as deep red as his hair. Never, he growled, mind so scrambled he wasn't able to say anything else. Hair flared up. He stomped away angrily, muttering to himself about something I couldn't hear. This might be the first time anyone thanked him and meant it. His flustered reaction, something no one would believe if I told them. Nick waited outside the hospital so he could get me home. After this case, I really needed a break. Far too much to think about and second guess myself over. I called my sister to explain to her what was decided. She honestly didn't care about her newborn or much about anything. The person I thought I knew, long gone. The sister I'd loved for so long died to be replaced by a person I knew nothing about. It was as if I'd lost my entire family finding out the truth. When Nick gave me an awkward hug, I knew I didn't lose my family. I still had a sibling left, and my nieces and nephew. I swore then I would never let anything happen to them. I was not going to lose another person I loved more than myself.